Hello everyone, my name is Super, Destiny Enthusiast, and I will be your Dungeon Master. Hunters, this guide video is for you. I will be explaining how each encounter for each dungeon works, along with the mechanics. If you already know the mechanics and encounters for all these dungeons, timestamps for all encounters are in the description below if you just want to skip to a certain encounter. Most of the footage and gameplay will be sped up besides the boss fights. They will play normally. Warlocks, Titans, your guides are in the description below. I also have included certain maps for certain encounters in the description as well for the newer players that don't know the loadout of the dungeons. With that said, let's jump right in. The first dungeon up is Shattered Throne. For the first encounter of Shattered Throne, the encounter is simple. You need to go around the Shattered City, killing these mini-bosses. Killing these bosses will drop a symbol. This symbol will tell you which area you need to go to next to kill the next mini-boss. You'll be running around this area until you reach the final boss, which will be back where you first killed the first mini-boss. When you defeat the final mini-boss, a section of the floor will open up. Jump down it to proceed to the next encounter. There will be a map in the description below if you do not know where these symbols lead to. My loadout for this encounter is Stasis. For aspects I used Winter Shrouds and Touch of Winter. For fragments I used Whisper of Torment, Whisper of Conduction, and Whisper of Chains. My weapons were Falling Guillotine, Ignition Code with Blinding Grenades, and Nation of Beasts Hand Cannon with Dragonfly. Any primary is fine, but I do recommend getting a Blinding Nade launcher for this encounter. For exotic armor, I ran Assassin's Cowl. This will be key throughout the dungeon. This allows you to get invis and gain health whenever you perform a finisher or get kills with your melee abilities. My mods consisted of Passive Guard, Taking Charge, and Protective Light. I recommend double concussive for resistance. I also used Radiant Light and Powerful Friends, but you don't exactly need those mods. Use them if you have them. For those of you that do not have access to Beyond Light or access to Stasis, I recommend using Bottom Tree Tether with either Omnioculus or Six Coyote if you have them. The descent encounter is easy. It's just killing adds and a mini-boss and progressing. For this encounter, I switched to a bow and a sniper rifle to make killing the adds easier. It also isn't a bad idea if you want to run a sniper resistance mod to be extra safe. Kill the adds and take your time until you reach the captain boss. I recommend either using your super or going invis and taking out the boss with your sword to open the door to the rest of the encounter. Once the captain is dead and the door opens, you will be traded to a group of adds in a jumping area. Kill the adds and then go to either the left or right side of the stairs as shown in the video and jump across. Take your time and kill the adds before proceeding to jump. Push forward to the end, then take a left up the stairs until you reach the ogre part of this section. Once you reach the ogre section, use your bow or sniper to slowly pick away at their health until the ogres are dead. Do not attempt to cross the area while ogres are alive. They will boop you off. Be careful of the holes that hold the pillars together as you can fall through them. You may also not need to jump anywhere, and you can potentially just walk the whole way there after killing all the ogres instead of jumping from place to place. Do this until you reach the end of the area. This will lead you to the first Thrallway. For the Thrallway encounter, I recommend you do a few things before actually entering. 1. Switch your weapons before you enter this encounter. This way you can grab ammo from the Shadow Thrall as there's no raid flags in this dungeon. This encounter is easy, just play your invis. I recommend just throwing a shuriken and running while you're invisible. If you run out of shurikens and you haven't gotten out, you can use your sword to swipe and glide to the end. If you do not have stasis or Assassin's Kell, you can just play your bottom tree tether or top tree tether and your 6 coyote and your Omnioculus and play your invis until you reach the end. For the first boss, the mechanics of this encounter require you to go around killing these taken yellow bar wizards. These wizards will be accompanied with ads, so kill the ads surrounding them first. There are 4 wizards, one where you first drop down, one on the left, one on the right, and one all the way in the back. Killing a wizard will drop you an orb you need to pick up with a countdown. If the countdown reaches 0, you die. You need 4 of these orbs to take down the boss's immune shield. Once you collect all 4 orbs, you can dunk the buff at a plate and do damage to the boss. For this encounter, I recommend switching to either a Void Primary or Void Special. I personally use Stasis as my subclass, and for weapons I used a bow and a Void Fusion along with Falling Guillotine. For mods, I recommend Passive Guard, Protected Light, Shield Breaker Charge, and Taking Charge. I also recommend Double Concussive or Concussive Sniper Resistance, or Concussive Solar Resistance isn't bad here either. Note, if you have Taken Spec, it will do more damage than your other mods to the enemies, so use it if you have it. For the encounter, I used my Glacier Nade as a wall. That gave me resistance, allowing me to use it as cover while giving me damage resistance. Note, this does stack with Protective Light, and may also stack with Passive Guard, allowing for massive amounts of damage resistance. I used Assassin's Cowl to go invisible when needed, and to heal when needed. For DPS, I went Invis, used my Revenant Super on the boss, threw my Glacier Nade near the boss, and started sorting him. I used my nade to give me resistance, and used Passive Guard on my sword to allow me to stack the resistance, allowing me to tank his attacks. If you do this correctly, it should be a one phase. If not, just rinse and repeat until the boss is dead. Once you reach the second Thrallway, I recommend using the room as a way to get ammo. I also recommend switching to a Wither Horde and a weapon with Dragonfly or Firefly if you have it. I would also suggest you switch to a Solar subclass, Bottom Tree Gold Gun, and put on Celestial Nighthawk if you have it. Once you get out of the Thrallway, kill the Phalanxes and be careful as one or two may spawn behind you and attempt to boop you off. When climbing the outside of the wall, just take your time and be patient and move whenever you feel like you can. Just watch out for the Hobgoblin. For the final encounter of Shattered Throne, the mechanics revolve around the 3 Abyssal Knights and the boss. To deal damage to the boss, you must pick up a buff that is dropped once you kill an Abyssal Knight. Killing all 3 of the knights will drop 3 buffs that, when picked up, will maximize your damage to the boss. The buff you pick up will also have a countdown timer. If it hits 0, you will die. There is an altar in the middle of the arena that will cleanse you of that buff. Do not do this unless you have 5 to 7 seconds left on the buff. Then jump into the altar and cleanse yourself. There will be also a group of scions on the left and right sides of the arena that you should clear out before attempting to kill the Abyssal Knights. If you do not kill the Knights fast enough, the boss will summon a massive crystal which will put immune shields on the Knights. This can be very annoying if you kill one of the Knights but 2 are still alive, or kill 2 of the Knights, etc. You must destroy the crystal to remove these shields. However, I suggest doing DPS to the boss first before removing the crystal. That is, if you've killed any of the Knights. Note, if you destroy the crystal, groups of the Scions will respawn and new Abyssal Knights will respawn if they didn't already. My loadout was Wither Horde along with a Nations of Beast hand cannon and Fallen Guillotine. I suggest using Celestial Nighthawk and Bottom Tree Gold Gun. This is because if you get all 3 of the buffs from the Knights, you can Celestial Nighthawk the boss and potentially one-shot it. Otherwise, it'll be two-phased. I also suggest using Wither Horde for tick damage against the Knights and the boss. If you do not have Wither Horde, Ignition Code with One for All or Vorpal will work just fine. Just use your super for boss damage and use Wither Horde for tick damage. I use my sword for resistance and passive guard to keep me alive and to keep distance between myself and the Knights. Mods used here are Protective Light, Taking Charge, and I recommend double concussive or concussive and arc resistance, or double melee resistance for the Knights. With that said, that is it for Shattered Throne. I'll be moving on to Pit of Heresy. For the first encounter of Pit of Heresy, I recommend putting on a sword along with a Vorpal sniper rifle, in either a pulse or an auto rifle. I use Stasis with Assassin's Cowl, and for mods I use the same mods as the Shattered Throne dungeon, those being Protective Light, Taking Charge, along with Passive Guard. Those are really the only mods you'll need. For fragments and aspects I use Winter's Shroud, Touch of Winter, and for fragments I use Whisper of Torment, Whisper of Conduction, and Whisper of Chains. If you do not have Beyond Light or Stasis, Bottom Tree Tether will work just fine. The mechanics of the first encounter revolve around 3 hive mini-bosses that you need to kill inside of a Scarlet Tower to progress to the next encounter. To find these bosses, a hive rune symbol will be on top of the towers, located throughout the area. Note, the bosses' locations will change weekly, so it may be different depending on when you're watching this video. To kill these bosses, you need a Swordbearer Knight's sword. You can acquire the sword by jumping down the route I take, clearing out the ads, and killing the Swordbearer inside of the first room, or finding a Swordbearer Knight out on the bridges located throughout the area. Once you're inside the Swordbearer's room, there will be hive runes hanging on the ceiling telling you which towers the bosses will be located in. There are 3 different bosses, a knight, a shrieker, and a wizard. Note, when traveling to their locations, watch out for yellow bar ogres wandering around, as they will eat you without any notice. They are usually accompanied with groups of ads, so be wary. Back to the bosses, you need to use specific attacks on the bosses to deal damage to them. For the knight, you need to use the light attack or the super attack to deal damage. For the wizard, you need to use the heavy attack button. Doing so will launch a projectile that will track and do damage to it. You can also use the super on the wizard as well. For the shrieker, you need to block with the sword. Note, it reflects the attack back at itself. Note, each tower will be surrounded by ads you need to clear to open the door into the boss's room. There will be ads inside of each of the boss's room. I recommend clearing them out. Once all 3 bosses are dead, a green beacon will appear at one of the towers. You need to travel to that tower and kill the yellow bar Pitkeeper Knight to open the door for the next encounter. Note, you do not need to kill all the ads, you just need to kill the knight to open the doorway for the next encounter. Once the Pitkeeper Knight is dead, you can proceed to the next encounter. For the Ogre encounter, I recommend switching to Bottom Tree Tether with either Omnioculus or Six Coyote. These exotics aren't required, but it does make this a lot easier. My loadout was Ignition Code with a Blinding Grenade Launcher and Falling Guillotine Sword. Mods do not change, primary weapon doesn't matter. The Ogre encounter mechanics revolve around 3 doorways that you need to open to proceed to the next encounter. To open these doors, you need to kill yellow bar knights located throughout the area and avoid the Ogre bosses. There's a map and a description for this encounter. The knights will drop void orb charges that you need to pick up and dunk at the doorways. Note there will be lots of ads that will be surrounded by the yellow bar knights. I recommend killing the ads first before attacking the knights. You need to do this for each one of the 3 doorways to open and proceed to the next encounter. If your invis happens to run out, or if you get into a situation with one of the Ogre bosses, the only advice I can give you is to either block with your sword to take less damage from their eye beam, or if an Ogre rushes you, to slam you into a wall, melee the Ogre, and try to run into a room if you're able to. Most of the time, if an Ogre catches you out in the open, it's usually an instant death. Just play your invis and you should be fine. For the Chamber of Suffering encounter, the mechanics are simple. Kill the same yellow bar knights as before, pick up the void orb, and dunk the void orb in the hive canister until the encounter is over. There is a totem in the middle along with a plate. You need to stand on this plate so the totem doesn't wipe you. Staying off it for too long will wipe you. There will also be a debuff called the Curse of Suffering. If this debuff reaches 10 stacks or so, you will die. Now, a few notes here. Whenever you dunk a void charge, a massive amount of Thrallway ads will spawn from the middle doorway and will come at you while you're standing on the plate. I suggest using Deafening Whisper or Witherhoard to clear them out easily. There will also be 2 Boomer Knights that will spawn on the upper left and right sides of the arena. Note, these Knights are a high priority. Kill them quickly. These Knights are extremely buggy. They can drop down or teleport or somehow find a way to breach the Matrix and become gods. Kill them fast. The loadout I used is Witherhoard with a passive guard sword. Primary doesn't matter too much, but a bow is best. My mods didn't change. I suggest using double concussive or concussive and solar resistance. Now, I'm gonna go off script here for a second. This encounter just sucks for hunters. I don't find it, enjoyable at all. There isn't really anything you can do besides play invisibility. I would personally recommend using Bottom Tree with Omnioculus for the resistance whenever you can use your smoke. I mean, you can use Assassin's Cowl and Stasis if you want to, but there's a bug with Stasis and the ads in the room and then Chamber of Suffering where if you kill too many of the ads with Stasis in the room, it ends up spawning double to triple the amount of ads that are supposed to spawn, so I don't recommend using Stasis. For the meat grinder trap, all you need to do to get down safely is use your sword and cling onto the sides of the ledge. You can use your sword to swipe to the sides if needed, then jump down whenever you feel like it's safe. This can be seen a lot clearer in the actual gameplay. For the fourth encounter, all you need to do is kill 3 wizards along with groups of adds that surround them to open the door to proceed to the next encounter. Weapon loadout doesn't really matter, neither does subclass here. The wizards are located throughout the area. You can find them by either running around and using your radar, or you can use the symbols. There will be a map in the description below for this encounter. I usually just use my radar to find enemies as I find it easier. There are spike traps that can kill you, but for the most locations, there are alternate routes you can take to avoid these traps. Note, the spike lanterns swinging around the area can and will kill you if you bump into them, so be careful of them as well. The locations of the wizards are also subject to change weekly, so be wary of that as well. Once you kill all the wizards, you can proceed to the final boss encounter. Just watch the gameplay and you'll understand. For the final boss encounter, I recommend using either Stasis or Bottom Tree Tether along with Mask of Bacchus or Assassin's Cowl. For weapons, I suggest Witherhoard for tick damage against the boss along with Interference V or the Canis Major Grenade Launcher. Full Court for Interference and Vorpal for Canis Major will be your go-to perks. For mods, I suggest either Double Concussive or Concussive and Solar. I also recommend using High Energy Fire for weapon bonus damage, just make sure you're charged with light when doing DPS. I use Stasis with Glacier Nades, and for Fragments and Aspects, I use Winter Shroud, Touch of Winter, Whisper of Torment, Whisper of Conduction, and Whisper of Chains. A bow is best for this encounter. The mechanics of this encounter are a combination of the previous encounters all in one. There are 3 bosses, the same ones from the first encounter you need to kill using a Swordbearer Knight's Sword. Once you defeat one of the bosses with the Swordbearer Knight's Sword, the mini-boss will drop a Void Charge. You need to dunk the Void Charges nearby the boss at the Hive Canisters. Note there will be groups of ads along with these mini-bosses. Clear the ads out as well. Back to the mini-bosses. You need to kill all 3 mini-bosses and dunk all 3 of these Void Charges at the Hive Canisters to start the DPS phase and do damage to the boss. To do damage to the boss, you need to be in the area of which the boss is standing in. The area will shine green. It'll be relatively obvious. You need to stand in this area to do DPS until the phase is over. Note, when the DPS phase starts, the Swordbearer Knights outside of the arena will try to kill you, and the Cursed Thrall will also spawn in during this phase. Try to stay in the area and avoid them, but be wary of them as the Cursed Thrall will follow you even after the DPS phase is over. To tell when the DPS phase is over, there will be an indication in the chat that will tell you that the boss is going to set the area on fire. Get out of the area when he does this, otherwise it can be a very fast instant death if you're in the area when he does set it on fire. Rinse and repeat this until the boss is dead. This should only take 2 to 3 phases. Some tips for this encounter: when you pick up a Void Charge, dunk it in at a different canister. For example, if you kill the Knight mini-boss, dunk the Void Charge by the Wizard's Tower. This will make it harder for the boss to kill you while you're dunking the charges and is also relatively a lot safer. I also recommend dunking the charges when you have Invis activated. This makes it very easy to get in and out quickly. I also recommend picking out one of the 3 towers from which one of the bosses is at, and using one of those as a spot or a camp to take out the other ads and the other bosses and to use as a separate space for yourself. Otherwise, that is it for Pit of Heresy, and I'll be moving on to Prophecy.
Guardian.
Prepare to expand your mind, Guardian.
Hey, at least try to make it sound fun, or they won't come back. You're killing me, Three Eyes.
I would love to kill you.
For Prophecy, I ran Stasis the whole way through. If you do not have access to Stasis or Beyond Light, Bottom Tree Tether with either Omni Oculus or 6 Coyote is a good replacement. For my Stasis kit, I ran Winter's Shroud, Touch of Winter, Whisper of Torment, Whisper of Conduction, and Whisper of Chains, along with a Glacier Nade. My weapon loadout is Blinding Grenade Ignition Code, alongside Trinity Ghoul and Falling Guillotine. Risk Runner is a decent replacement for Trinity Ghoul if you do not have it. My loadout does not change until the final boss encounter. For armor and mods, I ran Assassin's Cowl and the whole duration of the dungeon throughout all encounters. And for mods, I ran Double Concussive, Protective Light, and Taking Charge, and Radiant Light with the seasonal mod Passive Guard. I occasionally put on Powerful Friends and High Energy Fire, however you really only need Protective Light and Taking Charge with Passive Guard throughout this entire dungeon. However, I do change my mods during the final boss encounter. I recommend you put on Take and Spec on all your weapons if you're able to, as it will do more damage than the other specs. With that said, let's get into the mechanics for each encounter. For the first encounter of Prophecy, the mechanics are easy to grasp. You need to collect motes and dunk the motes into the canisters to open the doors. You need light and dark motes. You can acquire these motes by standing in either the light or dark sections of the area and killing the Taking Yellow Bar Knight. Standing in the dark and killing the Knight will allow the Knight to drop dark motes. Standing in the light and killing the Knight will allow the Knight to drop you light motes. You get the idea. This is the only mechanic throughout the entire dungeon you need to be focused and to be aware of. You must collect 5 motes to be able to carry and dunk the mote at the respective canister to open the doors. Do this until you progress onto the first boss encounter. For the Phalanx encounter, all you need to do is kill the Knights in either the dark or light, and pick up the motes and dunk the motes at each of the 4 respective canisters. Once all 4 canisters are cleansed, you can then do damage to the boss, which, to be honest, is easier said than done for a hunter. There are groups of Scions that will spawn initially at the start of the encounter. Clear them out using Trinity Ghoul or Risk Runner. Use your Blinding GL to kill the Knights and to blind the ad. Also remember to use your finisher and melee abilities to go invis and heal if you need to. A few notes. Whenever you dunk a mote at a canister, new groups of Scions will spawn in each time. Make sure to clear them out each time. If you end up killing all the taken Knights, new Knights will continually respawn until DPS phase starts or until all canisters have been cleansed. When the DPS phase starts, there will also be goblins that spawn in that will try to shield the boss. Just clear them out with your sword and continue DPSing the boss. When doing DPS to the boss, I suggest using your super, then throwing Stasis Grenade for resistance crystals, then going in on the boss with a sword. If everything goes right, this should only take 2 phases. Just rinse and repeat the mechanics, play your life, and play your invis, and you should be fine. The Wasteland encounter is really just an ad clear encounter. The encounter revolves around blights and ads that you need to destroy and kill to progress on to the next encounter. I suggest putting on a sniper resistance if you want to play it extra safe. For this encounter, I recommend killing the snipers first and clearing out the ads with Trinity Ghoul and a sword in case you get swarmed or rushed. Be careful of the yellow bar enemies, especially the captains and centurions, as they will group up and kill you. You can go on your Sparrow for this encounter, but be careful because there are a decent amount of invisible Minotaur bosses that will one-shot your Sparrow, which can cause it to explode and kill you instantly. You can ignore the Minotaurs, just be aware of them. Moving back to the Blights, once you kill all the ads and the Blights, a light wisp named Toland will appear in the center. You need to approach the wisp and follow his direction if you want to go to the next set of Blights and clear out the ads. Do this until you hear the bells or see a text in the chat saying the way is open, and then just follow my character to the next encounter. For the cube room encounter, the main mechanics once again revolve around the moats, canisters, and the knights. There will be 4 canisters around the room, and Toland the Wisp from the last encounter will either be on the wall above one of the canisters or on the ceiling. If he's on the wall above a canister, you need to get those specific moats, whether they are dark or light, and dunk the moats at that specific canister. If Toland is on the ceiling, you can get any type of moats and dunk them at any respective canister. Note you cannot dunk light moats at a dark canister or vice versa. Once you dunk the moats at the respective canister, you need to go to the middle plate, which will lift you up to a different environment where you need to rinse and repeat the mechanics. Now, to summon the knights, of which you'll need to kill to pick up the moats, you need to kill 2 hobgoblin snipers. Killing 1 hobgoblin will spawn 1 knight. You need at least 2 knights to get a moat that you can dunk at a canister. You will do this until you reach the boss part of this room. Once you reach the boss section, all you need to do is use your super and your sword or heavy weapon to kill the bosses. They are relatively squishy, just be careful and use your invis and resistance crystals throughout this encounter and you should be fine. Once you finish the encounter, go back the way you came when you first entered the room, and follow the taken Kell to the next encounter. For the Rainbow Road encounter, all you need to do is slowly walk down the ribbons and platforms while slowly taking care of the snipers and the ads. Just follow my character's path and you should be fine. Just to note, when you reach the bottom or the end of the pathway by the spire that will lift you up to the final encounter, be sure to kill all the ads below, especially the Phalanx. I say this because every once in a while, if you get sucked up into the spire, and one of the ads does as well, the enemy can end up smacking into you and killing you instantly. So kill all the ads below before going up the spire to the final boss encounter. For the final boss encounter, you will be switching your heavy weapon a lot. For the beginning part, I suggest using a sword with Blinding Grenade Ignition Code along with Passive Guard. These mods will also be subject to switch. The mechanics of this part are simple. Kill the knights, pick up the motes, and cleanse each one of the 3 corners of the room by dunking the motes at their respective canisters. Once all corners are cleansed, go to the middle plate. This plate will teleport you to the DPS part of this encounter. Before we get into that part, my tips and tricks for the room and the moat part of this encounter is to use your shurikens on the scions to trigger Assassin's Kell to go invis and heal when you need to, and to use Gambler's Dodge to always have one of your shurikens available. I also highly recommend you use your Glacier Nade as a wall for cover. It makes this part a whole lot easier and gives you resistance. Use Trinity Ghoul in your sword with Passive Guard to kill the ads and to have extra resistance. I suggest finishing or killing an ad before you pick up any motes, that way you have invis when you dunk the motes at the canisters. Reminder, each time you dunk a mote at one of the 3 canisters, an ogre will spawn in that section. Make sure to either blind or sword the ogre to death when it spawns in. Be wary that groups of scions will also spawn regularly as well. Now, when you've cleared out all 3 corners and all the ads do not immediately go to the DPS room, instead I suggest you use a linear fusion rifle with either reeds or a threaded needle with either Vorpal or Frenzy, and switch off Passive Guard to Particle Deconstruction. Then wait in the room until more scions spawn. You will be killing the ads until the linear is full on heavy ammo. Once you are full on heavy ammo, then go to the middle and proceed to the damage phase room. You should be swapping off your sword and linear and doing this for each phase. If instructions are unclear, you can just watch the gameplay and see what I do, and you'll get it. Now, the mechanics during the boss fight that you need to be aware of is Dark Entropy, and the boss's blast attack. Dark Entropy is a debuff that will stack 10 times if you are too far away from the boss. You need to be in proximity of the boss, otherwise the buff will stack up and eventually kill you. The Captain's Blast attack, if it hits you, will teleport you away from the boss to a random location. Be careful, as this may cause you to die by falling off the platforms if you are too nervous or hasty. The boss will also move away from platform to platform. You need to keep up with him to make sure you don't die to Dark Entropy. Note, you can also go ahead of him, so don't be afraid to push forward or to actually just full on go ahead of him. There will also be Hobgoblin snipers that spawn in. They are a higher priority than the boss, as you can dodge the boss's attack with relative ease. Kill the Hobgoblin snipers when they spawn in. For DPS, use your super and your linear to do damage. You do not need to take any unnecessary risks. Once the damage phase is over, switch off your linear back to your sword and switch off particle deconstruction back to passive guard. Repeat this cycle of switching weapons until the boss is dead. Just to note, you can stay in the DPS room as long as you want if you want to recharge your super or abilities. Just make sure you're not standing still, otherwise you can be kicked for inactivity. The rest of the mechanics is just rinse and repeat until the boss is dead. With that, this will conclude the Hunter Guide. When the new dungeon releases, I will be making solo flawless guides for each class as well, so stay tuned. I should also be back to a regular uploading schedule. Thanks for watching.
trembles in your wake. Your skills have not dulled since you slew the Taken King, and the Nine are as inscrutable as ever.
I think it's plain as day. They're trying to tell us the light don't make a saint, and the darkness don't make a sinner. The sinner does that. I mean, look at me. I run Gambit, but I pay my last city taxes. Harris? Are you there? Hello?